Welcome back to the Leaders Lab podcast. I'm your host, Kent Eslick, and today we have Mr. Shawn Lemon on the show. Shawn is the founder of The Digital Organizer. He not only has a knack for decluttering digital chaos, but he's been a lifelong tinkerer. A childhood building computers, bicycles, and delving into car mechanics with his dad to his adult life. He's been adept at simplifying complex topics. Outside of his digital pursuits, Shawn rides motorcycles, surfs waves, skates, crafts pottery, and loves reading. Yet at the heart of it all, his world revolves around his wife, Madeline, and their son, Nico. Please join me in welcoming Shawn Lemon to the Leaders Lab. Hi, Shawn.
Hey man, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. I was telling you right before we got started, like this show, this is any of our listeners that know me well know that I am a freak for time management, organization, and decluttering things. And you're the expert in this world, so I can't wait to dive in with you a little bit more. How did you get here, though, Shawn? I'm always curious about the kind of the entrepreneur's journey or the leader's journey, and where did that all start for you?
Yeah, it started at the Apple Store. I worked there for about 7 years as a trainer. So I taught people how to use their new Apple tech.
Cool.
But I'd have these people coming into the store who they'd buy new stuff. They're so excited about creating something with it. They wanted to make photo books or, create or a video or something like that. And they'd have all their information transferred onto this new computer, and it would be a total mess. And some people they can just work right through the mess, but there's a lot of people out there who can't work through it.
Mhm.
And when it gets so big, they get locked down and they need extra help, getting organized. And so it doesn't just come naturally, and there's an anxiety to it that people feel like they should be better at it than they are, and they should know all of this stuff. And trying to solve some of those bigger problems at the Apple Store in an hour session was impossible.
Right.
And so by trying to manipulate the schedule, I kind of it, I was able to help people, but not at the best. The best use of everyone's time, especially my fellow employees who were trying to finagle everything to make it work. So eventually, I was challenged by a coach at a lunch, asking me if I wanted to be an entrepreneur or entrepreneur, and that helped kind of send me over the edge and get my business license and start off on my own. With the help of Tony Robbins' Business Mastery, really lightened me up as well.
Oh, I didn't know that was your background. I'm a Tony trainer, and so I've guided people through that seminar many times. So cool. So that was kind of the catalyst. That was jumping off point. When you got
Mhm.
into it, was the idea that you were going to create a course, write a book, or do individualized coaching, or kind of what was your approach going in?
My approach going in was to figure out how to run a business
Mm-hmm.
so that I could coach other people on how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Tony really inspired me as far as helping other people, and that's always been my natural inclination. People would come to me, just friends, when I would get a new computer or when I switched to Mac. They're like, "Hey, how do I use all this stuff?" People just gravitated me to ask me about it, and I love helping. And so, yeah, that was a big part of it. I kind of lost some of my train of thought there.
Oh no, it's okay. I was
Question.
like, what was your approach going to be though as you started to build that
Oh,
business?
right,
Like,
right,
what
right.
was your revenue stream going to come from? I guess.
Well, the revenue stream is going to come from services. And then
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to create courses, and realizing that the technology moves so fast, and having people um, kind of beta test what I was taking them through, I got so many follow-up questions. Well, what about this? What about this instance? What about that instance? And I realized that there's a framework that you can naturally work off of, but then there's a whole bunch of roadblocks where it needs to be customized for different people. And so it would be an incredibly intense course, or I could have a framework that I could take people through that I'm looking for the people who want help. Um, they want a framework, but yeah, they need a little helping hand to get there. And so it was at first services, and then let's see where it goes from here.
When you're talking about a framework for you, what does that mean? Like a good schedule, a good way that they're organizing things? Like what is that initial framework?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. That's the model of how do we organize? Like, what are
Right.
the rules? how, like, that's the thing with all of this technology, we have so many options. So we need someone to give us a framework to work inside of and say, this is what's important. That's actually what we're known for, is helping you figure out what's important
Mm-hmm.
and where to find it, because, yeah, lots of options. So we interview them to figure out what's important to you about this aspect. What are you looking for? What are you looking to get out of the use of whatever technology we're talking about? And then we show them how, what's important about it, and their general principles around it of, yeah, how much time do you spend on it? Where do you put it? How do you name things? And where you should be spending your time, and what's a waste of time, to go back and do as well.
Is that where, I noticed, I was listening to you on another podcast, and I think they were talking about one of the questions they asked you that I really liked was, how do people get traction in this area? Is that one of the main, I would guess it would start there, is by really figuring out what's important. Yeah.
That's right. Because with digital organization, especially the space that we're in, we're dealing with the more basics stuff of email, files, passwords, project management, the things that you do really well. Then you can build off of them. And if you don't do them well, you're going to be constantly putting out fires.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought again on that one.
No worries, no worries. I'm thinking too, like, something that dawned on me when I was listening to you is I've gone through these different times in my career, and I'm wondering, you may have relate to this as well, and I'm certain that a lot of your clients can, but you know, how like you're in a job and you're performing well and you're doing well and you've got it under control. You understand the job. You understand maybe the organizational flow. Maybe you've got a good system. Maybe things are running well. You know who to delegate to. You know where everything is and kind of where it goes. And then something changes, right? You're given more responsibility, or the job changes, or you're moved to a new location, or whatever it might be, and your world that was all kind of in sync gets kind of thrown out of sync, right?
Mhm.
And that's happened to me a couple of times in my career. And I think for a lot of us, when that happens, we sort of wear it a bit like a badge of honor, like, oh, I'm so busy, or,
Mhm.
God, they just keep giving me more stuff to do or whatever. But I had a boss one time that I forgot his exact words, but my interpretation of it was, we rise, or we can only rise to our level of overwhelm. And meaning, if I can't figure out how to manage this data, if I can't find out, if I'm a general manager and I want to be a director, but
Yeah.
I'm swimming underwater as a general manager, no one's going to make me a director. It would actually be kind of cruel and unusual punishment to promote me while I'm struggling to do the job that I'm in. And so I
Right.
sort of mentally attach the meaning that I put around your kind of work is, I can't really get better without mastering where I'm at right now. Because in each, if you have $1 million company and it becomes a $10 million company and all else is equal, you're going to be dealing with 10 times as much information, 10 times as many employees, and 10 times obviously as much revenue. How do you handle that if you're not handling it at $1 million, right? Like, so I think what you guys do is I guess critical for the advancement of leaders. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Because you have to be able to release what you've been doing before,
Yeah.
to be able to think clearly about what's important about this new role,
Right.
because we've developed those neural pathways of, I do it this way.
Right.
And now I'm in a new scenario, and we have to be flexible and be curious about the new thing, and kind of just stop some of the input so that
Right.
we can focus on, okay, what is it? What do I have? We need to take inventory again of, what are my responsibilities? What's the heart of this job or this role or this process, whatever we're looking to, get better at, of like, okay, what is that all about? What's the most important thing? And then we kind of build up from there, and we have to release a lot of the old stuff. And that's the hardest part, whether it's changing our behavior or releasing some of the assets that we've created over the years, and realize that, oh, I don't have to have all of this at the forefront. Sure, we can keep it, but we need to organize for today,
Right.
whether that's organizing my day or organizing my files, or whether we respond to an email.
I'm always about streamlining, so I'm always trying to look at our tools and because we run a lot, we own a talent acquisition company and it's
Mhm.
all digital, and so everything that we do, we have all from email campaigns to applicant tracking systems to automation tools and things like that. There's
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff, and there's a lot of it, and I do a pretty good job, I think, of organizing it, staying on top of it, but I'm always looking for ways to consolidate. So I'd like to kind of geek out with you a little bit on like what are
Yeah.
you're a Mac guy, I'm a Mac guy. What are your I'm assuming you're still a Mac guy, but
Yes.
why would you leave after 7 years?
Mhm.
Not leave the store, but leave the platform, right?
Yeah.
But what are some of your, like if I said, what do you think the best email program is out there for, for this purpose, for really staying organized? Because I don't love Mac's native mail all that much. And I
Yeah. Me
find that
either.
Gmail, unfortunately, is a must have with some of the automations we have, but it is
Right.
clunky and weird. So
Mhm.
what are some of your let's start with email.
Yeah. So on a personal level, I'm using Spark.
I do too. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I love about it is the templates, the ability to schedule emails to be sent later, to snooze at a later time, and things like that, where I can say, okay, on my schedule, I know that I deal with this on Thursday mornings. So I'm going to snooze it for Thursday mornings, which a lot of other apps, you can't choose exactly when for all of the defaults. So you set your defaults of Thursday or whatever, and you choose the timing and everything. But the most critical piece for me about Spark is the ability to share an email with someone on the team. And
Mhm.
so we can have a conversation about the email without having to email and add to the chain and accidentally, send something to the wrong
Copy the
person. We can
client or
have that
whatever.
conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Missive is another good one. It's a next level up from that. There are certain things that I don't really like about it, clunkiness, but when it comes to communicating with a team and a larger team, that tends to be a better tool. Super interested in Superhuman, for someone who's got a more simple email setup. But if you're working with a team, I really just can't let go of Spark.
Yeah, we're using Spark. We're running Gmail through it.
Uh-huh.
And
Same.
so I actually let our employees kind of, choose their own email server, but it's all Gmail based. And so a lot
Right.
of us are on Spark. My only beef with Spark. So one of the things he was talking about, guys, is the ability to snooze. So I have this theory, and I kind of want to hear yours, but
Mhm.
I wrote a time management course for our GMs when I was back in corporate America, because again,
Yeah.
going with this whole theory of boss came in one time,
Mhm.
I was like, oh, I'm just so busy. And he was like, okay, great. I guess we're not giving you any more responsibility. And I went, oops.
Oops.
Okay, I guess I better get my hands around this. Right. And so one of the things that I came to for myself was I do not let things sit in my inbox, period.
Right.
Because to me, at some point, you're going to do one of probably three or four things with every email. You're going to reply to it, you're going to file it, you're going to delete it, or you're going to answer it, right? Those are, I guess, reply I already said. But anyway, and
You
so,
could avoid it.
yeah.
A lot of people avoid it.
Yeah, but the avoiding when you've got to respond, that's my problem. Is I'm
Okay.
like, how many
Yes.
times am I going to look at the same thing before I do the
Right.
action? Because the action,
Yeah.
sometimes someone sends you an email and says, here's the income statement from last month. Doesn't need a reply, but it is an important email. But all I need to do is file that away under maybe my financial files, right?
Sure.
But I don't want to look at it 5 times before I make that decision, right? I don't want to look
Mhm.
at this other email 5 times before I reply to it. So my thing is every day when I'm done working, I try to clear my inbox. Now, I think people mistake that in that it means everything's been handled. Well, some of that
That's
stuff's been
right.
snoozed, like you're saying.
Mhm.
Some of it
Yep.
is I don't need to deal with it right now, so I just don't want it in front of my face. This is
Mhm.
a email for another day, so let's just let it sleep for a couple of days. So do you generally keep your inbox pretty clean like that, or what's your routine, I guess, on a daily basis?
Yeah, my routine is to try and clear at the end of the day,
Yeah.
and snoozing is definitely a part of that. And I'll pick a time. And so that's one of the things I try and do is think, when do I want to handle this?
Yeah.
And so I know that Thursday morning is a great time to do this, or this is going to be Monday morning when I'm doing my initial planning, and checking to see if anything has changed since Friday when I did the review. So that's a big part of it is the snoozing and going through. Occasionally I'll leave something in the inbox like, okay, I know I'm going to come back to that. I'm just not ready to do it right now.
Right.
So I'm not militant about it, but I do keep it really clean. And I'm a heavy deleter. I'm a big unsubscriber.
Mhm.
I'm super ruthless about my newsletters and subscriptions. I've got a 20-year-old Gmail account that I don't get junk at. Like, it's just
Right.
stuff that I actually want. Now there's some spam, that gets filtered, but yeah, that's the inbox. Is snoozing is a big part, but it's combining that with your ideal week of what does the ideal week look like? When are you scheduling administrative tasks, or when do you schedule decision making? Well, I'm best at decision making in the morning, not at the end of the day. I'm best at for the end of the day, just knocking stuff out, just making it
Mhm.
happen, doing checklists sort of thing. That's my timing. So that's when I know to snooze things, or when I know to process specific types of emails. So it's understanding yourself, what your schedule looks like, what you're responsible for, and yeah, and then being really realistic of, is this an emergency? Do I really have to have my fireman's hat on all day and my email
Right.
open? No,
Right.
most people do not. You can get away with checking your email 3 times a day, and really waiting. So that's a big thing, is closing it out and say, I'm going to come back to that later because I got other work to do.
Well, I think our brains want the distraction sometimes, and so we have to be really cognizant of what we allow to get in, right? I mean, because
Oh,
if you're on a
totally.
task that you don't want to be doing, business development, calling people for money, like what, whatever, you'll be like, oh, oh, I got to answer that email. And no, you
Hmm.
don't.
Nope.
You don't have to. That's why I think let's go back to what you were just saying. You said you have your definition of a perfect week. So I'm assuming each week you're outlining kind of where you're going to be, what you're going to be doing in advance, and talk to me about that process for you a little bit, and then I'll share mine as well, and maybe we can swap notes.
Yeah, so my Monday morning is planning, catch up. It's going through Asana, looking at, I also have a hybrid between Asana and paper. I find having something physical helps me to focus more and center myself. It just makes me feel more grounded. So I have a hybrid between putting tasks in Asana and then writing them on paper. And that's kind of my anchor piece throughout the day. And so Monday morning is about planning, and seeing what's going on. So what am I doing, and what are my direct reports doing? And what are those projects, updates, and things like that, and kind of scheduling out what the meetings are going to look like throughout the week
Mm-hmm.
with the team, in seeing what might be needed from me, and then also centering on what are the big threes. So Michael Hyatt's son-in-law, so I'm really big on his whole full focus system. And so, your big three for the year, big three for the quarter, big three for the week, big three for the day. And so kind of planning out that. But then on my calendar, I've got blocks, so Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Friday afternoons are times that I'll have with clients. Monday is all internal. Wednesday is usually project work. And then when I don't have, other meetings with clients and things like that, then that's where things get filled in for other projects and general admin, or I can, take a nap or something.
I do something very similar. Every week I plan my week, and there's a certain amount of recurring tasks, like to your point, right? Like every Monday we've got a team meeting and things like that, right? So I can
Yep.
build those in. Um, and I fill in advance. And this is where I think it freaks people out. I know you've been
Hmm.
through this, the emotions that people attach to being scheduled, and they associate it
Yes.
sometimes with a lack of freedom.
Yes.
And I always have to talk them in off the ledge, because I'm like, look, it doesn't mean you can't be flexible. It just means
Hmm.
that it's no different than, I don't know, if you using a sports analogy, that we're going into this game, this, let's say, basketball game, and we're going into
Mhm.
this game, and we have a game plan, and that game plan is based on the things that we know at that time, right? The other team, how they play defense, who's on our team, how you shoot. And then you go, okay, we think initially this is the roadmap, right? And then something happens, somebody gets hurt, the other team is doing things you didn't expect, whatever it is. And in business, that's the economy, that's a customer calling, that's whatever, an employee showing up sick, and you adjust, right? And you just adjust on the spot. But to me, the lack of a game plan is I hate using all the cliches, but planning to fail. What is it? What do they say? Failing to plan is planning to fail. And I really
Right.
do
Yeah.
agree with that.
Mhm.
Like, how do you think you're going to get to your outcome if you never even started walking a step in that direction? Like, it's not going to happen by accident. So I do try to not try to. I'm pretty diligent about the outline of the week. Where I think I could do better is my brain still knows when a block is bullshit, meaning like, oh, that block is there, but there's nothing really going on. And you were kind of half
Right.
joking, like, oh, I could take a nap in there. But seriously, that is kind of where my head goes, because it's like, there's nothing that important happening in that block right there. So what I when I'm at my best, I schedule the week out in advance, and then I audit the day. So let's say Monday at the end of the day, I go, how did today go? Were we pretty
Yeah.
efficient? And this is just a
Mhm.
few minutes. What pushes into tomorrow? And then
Mhm.
specifically in those blocks, you were kind of alluding to this earlier, what's going to happen during that block? So instead of it just being a business development block that just says business development, maybe it's, I'm going to make 10 phone calls. I'm going to set 2 appointments, and I'm
Yeah.
going to create a new list of 50 prospects or something, right? That's a
Mhm.
lot more targeted and a lot more likely to happen.
Yeah. So I'll create the blocks,
Mm-hmm.
which is marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And then um, I'll often change the name of it. So when I come up into that week and I'm planning for it, it's like, okay, what is it beyond just marketing? Because
Right.
yeah, this is a bullshit block. I really don't want to do anything, or let me do something urgent because I don't really want to do this
Yeah.
task.
Yeah.
And is it really important? And we'll let something urgent take the spot, or I'm so tired
Yes.
instead in a nap. Sometimes naps are really great. I do enjoy them
Sure.
and want to make sure that I have them. But it's having that flexibility. So, yeah, you were talking about people being afraid to lock themselves in. And I have totally felt that because in some ways I really love structure, and
Mm-hmm.
structure allows me to go so much further and faster because I have less options. But then other times I rebel against it because I need something else. I need a break,
Mm-hmm.
or I really need to handle another client appointment, or a client issue or something like that. And so I'll just go in and change the name of the block,
Exactly.
or say put a nap in here, or whatever's there, and that's super helpful. But yeah, if we don't decide how we're going to spend our days, then our clients or family or whoever is going to decide for us, and we just move along. So but yeah, having that structure there is super freeing
Yeah.
instead
I
of
also like what you're saying
restricting.
about there's nothing wrong with changing the structure, because in the way that you just described, you're changing it consciously, right? It's
Uh-huh.
sort of like, if something's important enough that we want to make it happen, whatever it is, making those sales calls, doing that marketing thing,
Mhm.
whatever, and we put it in the calendar, and we get up on that block and we decide, like, hey, for right now I need something else, even if that's a
Mhm.
recharge or a
Mhm.
workout or whatever, or
Mhm.
just time with my dog or whatever it's going to be, that's okay. But because it was in the calendar, it doesn't go away, it just gets rescheduled, right? I mean, I kind of
Yeah.
tell people, it's almost like if you had a doctor appointment and you decided today's just not the right day for the doctor, right? Like, I had client meetings that went long. You don't just go, you know what? I'll just I'll go to the doctor when I feel like it. You don't do that.
Right.
You always would reschedule that. Same with the dentist, same with anything else. And so these things that when we were in the highest version of ourselves. So maybe it was on the weekend and we were going, what's my optimal week look like? So we were at this
Mhm.
higher version. We were kind of in advance. We're kind of saying to ourselves, how do I want to behave this week? Right? What do I want my outcomes to be?
Yeah.
And I just want to listen to that before making that decision. Right? I know
Mhm.
that if there's no structure there, then by design, I just think we're hardwired to do the thing we want to do at the time, not the thing that matters the most. But moving off so what do you use for your calendar, by the way? So I know Spark has one built in, but I felt like it wasn't all that robust.
Oh,
What do
I
you?
hate it.
Yeah, I do
Yeah,
too.
I hate the Spark calendar. Yeah, I specifically turn that feature off
Yeah,
in the preferences. What I did is I was using Fantastical
I did
before.
too. This is so
Um,
funny. We have a lot of the
yeah,
same tools.
but what I found is at a certain point, my calendar was changing really quickly.
Yeah.
Like I'd have, I was dealing with something or so, we'd have something kind of book last minute or change. Um, and it didn't update quickly.
Hmm.
So I still use Fantastical sometimes, but what I have now is in Chrome, I have Google Calendar, and there's a feature in Chrome where you can so I forget what it's called, but you like save it as a shortcut or its own page,
Hmm.
and it makes an app out of that web page that you're at.
Yep.
And so I just made the app of Google Calendar, and so that's what I use, but I don't like Chrome being able to notify me. So that's where Fantastical actually serves me up notifications. And then I also have notifications on my phone with my do not disturb settings. Google Calendar is allowed to, alert during my work um, focus time. So that way those still come through as well. So I kind of have them on both if I'm not sitting at my computer.
We're using the same main stuff. So I went back to Google Cal mainly
Mhm.
because of team integration and how easy that is and
Yeah.
visibility of like everybody else's calendars, right? So I can
Right.
kind of stack calendars next to each other and see who's available and when I'm scheduling meetings and stuff. And no real beefs there. I want to go back to Spark for a second. Have you found any kind of problem with searchability within Spark? I feel like I
Yeah.
like Spark and I like the interface the best, but it doesn't have the most robust internal search tools. So I end up
Mhm.
actually keeping a copy of Outlook that I'll launch every
Oh,
now and
no.
then just for hard to find things.
Yeah, but then
It's
you have to wait for it to load.
Oh God, it's ridiculous. But yeah, it does a
Yeah.
better job though finding historical things. Like if I want to find an invoice that was sent like 2 years ago and I just want to put a couple of keywords in there, it's probably gonna find it. Spark never will.
Mm. I go to gmail.com to search.
Okay.
So if Spark doesn't serve it up to me within seconds, then I immediately stop. I just go to Gmail and then I can find it really quickly because the search tools in Gmail are so good.
Okay.
And they have advanced search terms as well. And we use this in our process for helping people clean up we just hit a new record, which was over 300,000 emails in an inbox, not just on the whole account, but
Which gives
300,000
me
in
the
the
willies.
inbox. So we use these advanced search tools to say, show me emails within this period through this period and, stuff like that. So you can just Google that for,
Right.
Gmail advanced search, but it works so quickly. That's just my go-to.
And
No extra app.
Asana is your task and project management software, it sounds like.
That's right. Yeah.
Um I'm using Notion. Have you worked with Notion before?
Yeah, totally. I think it's a cool app. I'm super leery of do it all apps because too many options, all those things. I really like dedicated spaces for things. So I do use Notion, and that's my wiki for my internal wiki for sort of solutions and answers to problems and other things that are harder to navigate in Google Drive. But yeah, so I'm a little leery of using it for other things. But if you're really organized, then those tools work well. Plus, I like Rails. Like, give me Rails, give me something that's like built for it, so that I don't have to think through the framework. I got so many things that I'm thinking about,
Right.
much as like nerding out on creating a whole system within this thing because it's a blank canvas. But then again, there are great templates as well. So you can go back and forth on it.
Do you have Asana talking to like your calendar or your task app or, Apple reminders or anything like that? Or how does that integrate?
Asana is talking to Calendly. So
Mm-hmm.
when someone books a call, then they show up in Asana. Uh, and then it's also linked up with Pipedrive, my CRM. And so when I win a deal, then they pop into a specific project and have certain fields populated and everything from there. I do not have it integrated into my calendar. So for my calendar, it's appointments, it's time blocks. My calendar directs me of where I need to be at the time. And then all of the work is scheduled out in Asana. There's a temptation of putting your to-do list and action items in the calendar. Whereas, if you're using your project management software well, then the tasks that you need to do are already in there. And then all of the assets are attached to it. So, if I'm working on a project that has to do with copywriting, well, the copywriting is in Google Drive, and the URL to that document is pasted into the description of the task in Asana. So I've got that context, and maybe I've got an email that's also part of the context from the client or whatever. Then I copy. Spark can actually publish a link to an email, so then I get the link and I stick that in the description as well. So I've got all of that context right there, and I don't have to open up other apps or go other places. It directs me to marketing work, and marketing work may be inside of Asana. And then from there, it's going to link to all of my assets.
Very cool. I'm using Notion in a similar way, but I do hear what
Uh-huh.
you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm using it, so for those of you out there that struggle sometimes with, so for me, when our company was smaller,
Mm-hmm.
all the standard task, even Apple's built-in reminders or Google
Yeah.
Tasks or whatever, those were all like perfect, right? And I could get them to like show up at the top of my calendar, and they were great. And I think the challenge became when you start running into projects and you start working with multiple people, right? Or you
Right.
have
Yeah.
something like, here's a marketing campaign kickoff that it has 4 different people and a client and tasks that are assigned to everybody, including the client, that are happening at different times on different people's calendars, right? And how do you integrate all of that? And so that's really what we're talking about, guys, with these tools, whether it
Mm-hmm.
be Notion, Asana. There's some really good ones out there. Monday, I think, is pretty good. I've messed around with that a
Mm-hmm.
little bit.
Yep.
Very
Click up.
click up. Yep. I can just like bring up software all day long. Let me ask you, so what's the biggest resistance you get? I mean, I have to assume that when people are reaching out to you, they know they're kind of stuck, right? And
Yeah.
they're they want help, but again, I don't know why there's so much emotion around this stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
there seems to be. I've tried to help a lot of people, and I'm not a pro at it, and I can feel the emotion, right, of letting go of the old systems, and I can feel the
Yeah.
emotion of, like we were talking about earlier, adapting to a schedule. Like, what is that for you? What are the common roadblocks that you face with clients trying to get organized?
Well, I think it's a couple of different things. Once they're in the process, once they've committed and they're doing it, it's then releasing the old things that they've been doing and allowing a new way of thinking about it. Because once you start changing, so we just had someone where it's that 300,000 email inbox. So we got through the backlog, we got things cleared out, and the last things processing the last 30 days. And she's like, okay, I feel so much better about it now. Like, and now she's resistant to try and get to inbox zero. And so I was just talking with the employee who's doing that project yesterday, and so I'm asking more about it, and he's like, what I think is happening is she's realized she has to change the way that she operates, and she can't just keep doing the same thing, and so she's using her ADHD as an excuse, saying that the being able to see everything actually helps her focus.
Right.
And like, mm, uh, we we don't have the same opinion.
Right. Right.
So, uh, my response was, first off, let's try and get her to do an experiment. So say, this isn't permanent. You don't have to keep this up, but you did hire us to help you with this. And we're pretty sure that you're about to end up right back to where you were before. It may take some time to get back to 300,000, but you're going to get back to where you were before because you're really not changing the way you operate. What if we do an experiment and you just be consistent about this and do what we're talking about for the next, how long do you want to do? Can we do it for 2 weeks? Can we do it for 30 days? And then you can come back and let's see where we go from there. So we realize that we have to change and we have to do something else, or maybe we don't realize it. Our unconscious just wants to go back to that old pattern. And we lose, how do I say this? We lose the thread of what's important about it, of why we're doing it. And so in that case, and I actually do this in the discovery call process, and we try and do this throughout the process along the way when we encounter any sort of resistance, is we try and play out the worst case scenario. So obviously, Tony Robbins, it's pain or pleasure that humans, are the motivators that make humans change their behavior. So it's usually pain that really gets us to change, not necessarily the pleasure, but we want to use both of them. So we start with the pain, though, of what happens if we continue down this path? And so play out that whole scenario of, well, if this, then what about that? And what are those cascading effects, far reaching, far beyond us, but our team and how our teams are feeling and how that's going to translate to our clients and, that whole thing, and helping people connect why it's actually important to them. And in that process, you find out what's important to them.
Right.
Well, it's important that people think that I have everything together. Okay. If you do this, are people going to think that you've got it together? No. So we need to tie the importance and the sense of urgency to this task that they want to gain traction on, or this, behavior that they want to gain traction on. So I think it's just trying to connect those two dots of this is important when you're not interested in it. That can be a real motivator. And I think it's all about interest and whether or not it's a priority. And so using that pain amplification process can be super helpful getting the traction.
Kind of interesting too, because I don't know, just the way we're kind of wired as humans, because you got to figure by the time you hire a firm like yours and, you're 300,000 emails deep or whatever, and, the level of chaos and mind space and bandwidth that's taking up, right? Because there's got to be this constant thing of, even though they claim that they know where stuff is, it's like, come on, like, it's not organized. You can't find it. I am organized and I still can't find stuff sometimes. So, it's and you give them the relief and they feel the relief, right? Through going through, and it's like, and then almost immediately it's like, well, I'm relieved now. So now I can go back to the thing. Right. And it's like, it's almost like you just got out of an abusive relationship and it's like, oh, I feel some relief now. I think I'll go back, and it's like, no, like, don't go back. And it's funny. I mean, I think a lot of it, like you're saying, is they've got to have a North Star. They got to have some leverage on themselves.
Yes.
Do they want to end up back in that spot? So what are some of your other, I'd like to pick your brain a little bit more. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, let's just go back to that for a second. The other key thing is we have to change the environment.
Yeah.
So you don't want to go back to an abusive relationship. Well, we need to totally change the environment that we're in, or we are going to slip back in. It's like most addicts, if they go back home, they're going to relapse. Like they got to get out of that situation. And so that's a big part of the process for us is, okay, we got to get the leverage. We have to clean up, but then we have to change the environment and make it look new and have a new place, something that you want to spend time with and you want to maintain. And then once you get used to doing that new thing, then you want it. Just like if you don't have a hook for your keys, and you're always losing your keys, then you finally do something really simple and you put a hook up and you start putting your keys on it. And then you always know where your keys are, but your spouse doesn't use it.
Right.
And they're constantly looking for their keys. And it just reinforces me I always want to do it. Do I always put the keys on the hook? No. But I realized at some point, because I was just in a hurry, I come in the house, then I feel my keys in my pocket. It's like, oh, let me go put those back. And I'm going to put my wallet right underneath them where they normally go. And so now I find comfort and an identity in being changed, because that's the thing. If we really have to change how we think about ourselves, not from I'm a disorganized person, but I'm an organized person. And I take pride in that. And I like having it organized. And I'm not going to do it perfectly. But when things get off track, I know exactly where to put them because I designed this system and I took the time to do it. And it was sometimes a little painful to go through the process of getting cleaned up. But now I have this new thing and I want to maintain it.
Right.
And if you can get your team to do that, and you can create a culture around being organized and being excited about being organized, then you're making lasting change.
Totally.
And that's really what we're looking for. And the key thing, once you clean up, because anyone can clean up, but designing a whole new space around how you work with someone else asking you those questions and then maintaining it and having some accountability, that can be really magical. And you can do that within your own team, having someone else on the team come in and go through this process. You can change that. It's
I'm
pretty
so
cool.
glad that you brought this up because going back to kind of my times of overwhelm, I remember one of the last ones I had a little more maturity and a little bit more tools in the toolkit, and yet I still hit this crossroads of I've taken on more than I can chew. Right? It was like took on a whole extra big assignment, and but this time I knew. I was like, well, wait a minute, this is this temporary or long term, and like, what do I need to do? And I remember thinking to myself, like, when do I do my best work administratively? Because how like a lot of times when we get overcommitted, we're always like, man, if I could just have like, couple of days in the office I could catch all this stuff up. And then, what I found was I'd get on like an airplane and I wouldn't need a couple of days. I'd need a couple of hours. Right. And why? What was special about the airplane? It's like, well, I can't do anything except that work. There's literally the thing called airplane mode on our phones for a reason, right? And on top of that, even if I want to get up, there's a beverage cart in the aisle. I can't even go to the bathroom right now. Like all I can do is focus and do what I'm supposed to do. And when all I can do is focus and do what I'm supposed to do, then the amount of time it takes is just significantly cut down, and I can almost make a game of it. Like, okay, how quickly can I get through this? And how much stuff can I get done? And so I remember thinking about that and I went, well, who controls that? Like, if I want to recreate that environment at home or in my office, like who controls that? And I'm like, well, I'm in control of that. I mean, a lot of people would say, well, I can't have that because I have employees that are going to walk in or clients that are going to walk in or, Amazon orders that are going to come. And I'm like, we all have that stuff. Like we get to decide what comes in and what stays out, at least during certain hours. Right. And so I remember going back and penning like a memo to my team, and the memo was very much, it's me, not you. I've allowed too many distractions into our workplace. I've allowed my door, while I want to have an open door, it doesn't need to be open 24/7 because if it is, I can't perform for you guys. Right. So I set up like new rules of engagement. And one of them was around email. And I kind of said, here are the ways that we can communicate together. Right. Email, I'm going to check 3-4 times a day. Please do this for all general business communication, especially things with attached files or whatever. Another way that you can is through text. Now, I will check text once an hour. I typically work in 1 hour blocks that are more like school periods. They're like 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off. And I'll check your text and if it makes sense. But again, that's a different level of urgency. So please let me know. And then if you really need me, meaning like we're going to lose this deal, building's on fire, whatever, then call me. I mean, you can call me. And pick it up, I'll pick it up, but understand that you're taking me off task. And I encourage you guys to incorporate the same types of rules if they make sense for you, and I'll respect them in the same way. And that was it. And so I was able to create kind of my own like airplane environment, if that makes sense. Right. And it was like night and day.
Yeah, it's huge. And we've got to figure out at some point, what's our communication plan?
Right.
How do you want to be communicated with? And because all of our tools, like we can communicate through Asana, through Notion, through text, WhatsApp. You can DM me, Slack channels, Slack DMs, Slack group DMs. It just keeps going on, and so many companies we work with are struggling with this. And gosh, we struggled with it when growing. And at first, it's like I called and text my assistant, but then hired an employee, and we had another employee, and she's like, "Well, why are we using this?" Well, in Slack, all we're doing is talking about work, talking about tasks. So Asana has a feature where you can talk about the
And you can
task right
comment on the
there.
task. Yeah.
So let's comment on the task. And so we got rid of Slack because our team was small enough. And if you got something urgent, call or text. And, and we're not emailing each other. It all happens through Asana. And it's usually if it's not something personal or fun, then it's about a task. And if the task isn't in Asana, it should be.
Right.
So create the task and then let's
And then
talk
comment
about
on
it in
it.
there.
Yeah.
And it's huge. And that's the thing that, gosh, organizations, like if your organization is all over the place and people are having a hard time prioritizing and everything, it's probably your communication plan. And you need to spend some time thinking about, well, how does this team talk? And how do we talk as a team, a siloed team? How do we communicate as an organization? How do we communicate one-on-one inside of our team? And spending some time to think through that, beta test it, and see how it works. But then we have to do it personally as well. I know some people that their thing is they just put headphones on. It's like, hey, if you see I'm wearing headphones, like do not disturb me,
Sure.
stuff like that. But
I think the
yeah,
other big one for leaders, especially, is just own it. Like, I hear a lot of people say, well, I can't do this because so and so keeps coming into my office or whatever. And I'm like, you're the boss. Like, you get to decide kind
Mhm.
of how this works. And even if you're not the boss, you get to decide how your personal space and how you allocate your time. And so just take personal responsibility. And again, you have to retrain people. If people are used to you responding to a text the minute you send it, or they send it, right? Like they send you respond, they send you respond. The first time you don't respond for an hour, they're going to probably freak out or think you got in a car accident, because for years
Right.
that's how you've been doing it. So you just let them know, like, hey, I've been too all over the place. I've actually been too attentive in some areas and not attentive enough in the others. So here's how it's going to be moving forward.
Mhm.
But taking ownership of it, right? And I think structuring your own environment, that's critical. As we close up here, I'm curious, AI, obviously, the thing, especially over the last couple of years, I'm seeing it come into these tools everywhere. Like in Notion
Yeah.
has pretty good little AI engine within
Mhm.
it. Spark is doing some AI. So even tools that aren't built for AI have AI now. Like,
Mhm.
how is that impacting things in what you do? And do you see it at this point? Is it, I guess long term, it's probably a benefit because it's technology and it's good.
Yeah.
Short term, is it causing harm? Like, what does it look like in your world?
It hasn't been affecting us too much. I think eventually it will, but I think it's going to take a while still, because in the end technology is amazing, but it still needs to be directed.
Right.
And we have to tell it what to do. Um and so like there's some AI, supposedly in Dropbox to rename your files for you and do things like that. But if you really look into it and see how it works, like it's not worth using.
Mm-hmm.
Automation starts with ourselves and really understanding what our process should be.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can go in and actually use the automation. So we got to figure out the process first and then do it. I think once AI gets to a point where it can ask you all of the clarifying questions to then get to what you should be doing, then it can take action and sort everything for you. That's when I think my job will really change, or the job of the digital organizer. But in the end, what our focus is what's important and where do I find it, and figuring out, wrapping our heads around the technology and how do we direct it and really figure out what we're looking for. then to be able to apply the technology, that's at the heart of it. So that's really our anchor point that's going to keep us centered. But I think we've got quite a bit of a runway until AI gets to the point where it's interviewing us for the right things, and then it has the capability to scan and sort things, filter them out, and do it. I'm excited about that, because some of this stuff, it feels like it should be easier than it is. But there's just, yeah, so many options.
I
So if
like
you
the
could get it
idea
to
of,
interview you, I think that'd be really cool.
I think that would be the next step, certainly towards organization. I think right now what I use it for is almost a when it comes to what we're talking about today, is almost like a like within Notion, again, they've got AI built in. So if I create a
Mhm,
task in Notion that said something like prepare for my trip for Italy,
mhm,
I could also say, hey, Notion, what are the top 10 outdoor activities in Venice? And it's going to spit all those out for me. You know what I mean?
mhm,
Or
mhm,
if it's social media day on Tuesday and we want to do leadership tips on whatever, then we can have it create something. And I don't like running with AI. I think it's inauthentic and obvious still
mhm,
a lot of times.
mhm.
But I think it assisting in the framework of a conversation, right, or in the framework of a
Yes,
project, I think is really cool
I think
uh,
it's awesome.
and time saving. Yeah,
Yeah,
but I think to just click it and go is a mistake that a
I
lot of people are
know.
making, and it's
Yeah,
kind of an obvious one.
you can't. Yeah, you can't go that direction. But as far as helping you create a framework, it's amazing. It's actually two thoughts that come to mind when it comes to ChatGPT for me personally. One of them is it's actually helping me be a more effective leader because it needs input. So if I ask it to do something and it doesn't give me what I want, that means I gave it a bad
Yeah,
prompt.
you were
I need to get
unclear.
more
Hmm.
detail, and so I need to get more clear. And so it's making me become get better at clarifying myself at the beginning of really what I'm looking to get out of it. And when it comes to writing any sort of content or helping me with content, uh, I have to give it the heart and tell it this is the motivation. Yes, this is an email going out to different people, but the idea behind it is this, and you missed that part. This isn't a sales email. Like, yes, I'm trying to drive leads, but I want to give them a resource that they can take with them. This is the idea behind it. And so then and I actually have long conversations with it and in writing out this whole thing, and then it still gets it wrong.
Right.
But through that process, it helped me clarify my ideas even better. So I
Mm.
start with a full-on newsletter that I'm thinking about sending, and then I say, "Hey, let's go through this and see if we can make it better." And then it reformats. I'm like, "That's good." We work, and then I go back and rewrite it again. But because it's like, "Oh yeah, I should bullet that out and do these other things," and it's really cool.
I've
But
never
it's
heard anyone say that Shawn, like that, but you're so right. It's like kind of training us to ask better questions,
right.
or certainly more clear, or to anticipate where someone might get stuck through our lack of instruction, right? So, hey,
Hmm.
write me an article on blah, blah, blah. Oh, wait, I
Hmm.
didn't mean that. I need this. I need you to narrow it down. I need you to
Yes.
filter it down. I need you. So now it's almost like in advance, instead of me talking to it 10 times, maybe I can clarify my questions and get it down to 2 or 3 questions, right? Instead of
Right.
10.
Hmm.
So that's really cool. Anything you want to share with us before we go? I feel like 45, 50 minutes went by pretty quick here.
Yeah.
But I love this stuff. I could keep talking to you about it all day. But anything else that you're working on currently that maybe our audience should know about, or anything else that you'd like to share with us?
I mean, mainly it's our viewpoint is to try and figure out what's important, help sort things out, teach people a process. And so, those are our values. And
Mhm.
so I would say if you want to get better at something, obviously you're listening to a leadership podcast. But dig into some of the different tools, listen to your people about what they really need and what this tool is for. Use beta groups for testing things out, and don't just implement a new technology because you heard that we're using Spark. Don't just throw it out there because you heard about it on the podcast, but test it out, be intentional about it, and go through a process. And part of that process, I like to show people. So I've got a resource for you if you want to go to the digitalorganizer.com/leaders lab. You can download this guide, and it's the framework that we use to think about organizing our files. And I think it'd be really interesting to you to think about how do we name things? How do we go through the process of consolidating? And you can take this resource and give it to your operations team and say, hey, you might want to take a look at this and see if we can apply this to how we do these things. And so that framework is applicable to all different kinds of systems. But it's a way of thinking. So head over there, check it out. If you're interested in talking to me, you can come to our website, thedigitalorganizer.com. Be happy to talk with you.
Thanks so much, Shawn. And we'll share all of your links, of course, in our show notes. Appreciate you being with us. And thanks for joining us on the Leaders Lab.
And thanks so much for having me. It's been fun.
All right. Take care. Nice to meet you.